Hello Internet, I'm the Disney Brain and welcome to the Girl Meets World review. Last time, we covered a sensational episode and arguably the most important topic the series has covered to date. This time around, something very different but also very familiar if you've been watching the show regularly. Spoiler warning now, you know the drill. With all that said, let's dive into Girl Meets She Don't Like Me. We start things off with Riley excited by the idea of branching out and making new friends, an idea that Maya isn't overly fond of. This leads to Riley, well, being Riley, to an unsuspecting student who firmly rejects her advances, leading to the all too familiar sight of Riley down in the dumps because of what someone else said to her. Then we get to health class, which also means a new teacher to introduce, and he's actually pretty entertaining, especially compared to most of the other secondary teachers that we get. Riley, however, has her own desires about how the class should be taught, which all stems from the central idea in this episode, control, and more specifically, how much of it we should have. Something that Topanga knows a fair bit about from her Boy Meets World days, and if you know her from that show, then both her position and added perspective makes sense here. This leads to the original health teacher getting switched out for Mr. Matthews, because if there's one thing every teenager desperately wants, it's to be learning about the human body from their parents, with all their friends around. A reality that makes Mr. Matthews more than a little uncomfortable with the lesson plan this time around. This leads to Smackle's explanation, and boy did I ever miss her. I still can't stand all of this. Seriously, there's way too much of this. Girl Meets World, please stop, please. But in other areas of this episode, she's a welcome presence and good for a few laughs. I know this is Disney Channel at the end of the day, but I remember taking health class way back in elementary school. Are we really gonna pretend like censoring almost this entire episode, both literally and through omission of information, isn't just kind of pointless, but also kind of undercuts a rather sizable chunk of the central theme here? The whole point is that we control our own bodies, but everyone's too awkward and afraid to talk about the body and the specific choices that we make with them for better or worse. In any case, we get a really great moment from Riley and Topanga here, where Topanga explains how not controlling everything is okay, and it's very valuable advice that Topanga herself learned the hard way back in the later seasons of Boy Meets World, because if she hadn't, then maybe Corey and her never get married in the end. Also, there's no real side plot in this episode, which once again proves to be the better option, since Topanga was so valuable in this one, and Augie can more naturally insert himself into the plot of an episode, which he does here in a nice way through explaining his own views on the central themes. So Mr. Matthews is back to being awkward again, and for some reason he thinks the human foot has 3 toes? In any case, the real health teacher is back, and he gives a pretty great speech on what we can control, our bodies and our minds, which is a valuable point, but it feels kind of lacking just in the context of this episode, which goes back to my previous point about omission of information. I'm not saying that they should have literally spelt everything out for us, that just wouldn't fly on this network, no. What I'm saying is that they should have done more with the idea of choice. Since our bodies and minds are the two things most definitely in our control, then the things we decide as it pertains to those two things matter the most. It felt more like they were stating something very believable, but not convincing us to believe it, which isn't really a problem so much as it was a missed opportunity. In any case, the episode ends with Riley deciding to pay no mind to what other people think, because she can't really control that. However, Topanga still pretty much can control everything, and the girl from before who don't like her has parents who have now been charged with tax evasion. Moral of this story, don't mess with Mama Bear. And that's Girl Meets She Don't Like Me, an episode title that's lacking in grammar to go along with an episode that felt lacking in general. This was a fairly solid episode, but compared to the most recent two, it feels like a step backwards. We just got through shedding light on the very real and very emotional plights of entire nations last week, and this time around, nope, can't risk being too over it because then people might think we're encouraging something. But that's not even the big issue here, because I think the humor they get out of it is pretty good. The problem is that there wasn't enough emphasis on controlling what you can control until a couple of moments in the waning minutes, and too much emphasis on not being able to control everything. They could have had that great Topanga Riley moment at the beginning and then flesh out the idea of choice, because if you're going to bring health class into it, you could at least talk about what healthy choices look like instead of just telling people to make healthy choices. Now, this all could be a setup for a much more important episode down the road. Perhaps one where the main cast has to deal specifically with drugs or sex or other such body-related teenage temptations, and their lesson here will help prepare them for that. But then, I feel like they should have made this into a 2-part episode to expand on the idea more. All in all, I wouldn't call this one of my favorite episodes, and maybe I'm being overly critical this time around because I'm still so captivated by last week's much better one. I still like the episode in its totality, but as I mentioned, it felt very sparse given the kind of themes they were tackling, and a better episode could have been made from it. I do, however, think it's a slightly better take on Riley's insecurities than Jessica was, because through Topanga and the health teacher, it really did feel like Riley actually learned something here, and didn't need funny clothes or an alternate persona to accomplish that. It's not the greatest, and maybe my perspective will change if they do more of the idea down the line, but for now, it was just alright. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, go ahead and throw it on a like, sub for more, and share this review everywhere. And follow the Disney Brain on Facebook and Twitter for updates. Links down below. The coming days will bring the return of the Liv Maddie review, as well as the top 10 best leading female performances in DCOMs. So, lots to look forward to. Until then...
On page 73 of your health books, what they're trying to teach you is...